Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the debate between the Democratic candidates for Congress in Michigan's 3rd District. I'm Matt McLogan on behalf of the Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies and Grand Valley State University. Welcome. The 3rd District includes all or portions of Kent County, Ionia County, and Berry County. And the Democratic nominee tonight will stand in November for the seat that's currently held by Vern Ehlers and was previously held by Gerald Ford, Dick Vanderveen, Harold Sawyer, and Paul Henry. It's my privilege now to introduce the two candidates. First, Grand Rapids attorney Patrick Miles. Good evening.
Good evening. Good to see you.
And next, former Kent County Commissioner Paul Mayhue. Before the program started, the candidates drew lots, and Mr. Miles will go first. The questions that will be submitted to the candidates this evening have been given to us by the members of our audience who are invited guests of the Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies here at Grand Valley. Mr. Miles, it's your turn. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to start by saying thank you to the Grand Valley State University and the Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies for hosting this debate. Actually, I've known Mr. Ralph Hauenstein for many years, and he is a very fine and distinguished gentleman who served his country very well in World War II and has served this community and has been a great philanthropist. I also want to thank Mr. Paul Mayhue for being here tonight. I look forward to having a discussion with him. I really appreciated when I had decided to run for Congress that I called him, and he said, "Pat, you're not my enemy." And I told him the same. And I really appreciated that because that is the way it should be. If you've noticed, the candidates running in the other party, they're engaging in a lot of personal attacks, a lot of vitriol, a lot of nonsense. And that's not what we need in the country today. We've got serious problems. And I really am glad that we've been focusing on our side on the issues which are facing Americans, which are jobs, the economy, health care, the environment, budget, and the future. And that's why I'm running for Congress, frankly, because I was very frustrated watching Congress engaging in partisan bickering. All of the lockstep partisanship, the extreme partisanship, and the Congress people weren't solving problems. They weren't doing the people's business, they were doing their business. They were more worried about who's in power and how to get it, how to take it away, how to keep it, instead of solving the problems facing the country today. And that's why I'm running for Congress. I grew up in this community. I'm third-generation Grand Rapids resident. I'm a product of the Grand Rapids Public Schools. I went to Aquinas College. I majored in business administration and economics, and then went to Harvard Law School. And I returned to this community that I love to work as a business lawyer and to serve in the community in the areas of healthcare, education, and neighborhood development. And I believe in community service, and that's, again, why I'm running for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Mr. Mayhue.
Hello, I'm Paul Mayhue, a Vietnam-era vet, and I thank everybody for being here as well. And I thank God for allowing me to be here. But I'm a former county commissioner for 19 years, running for Congress because I believe I can make a difference. People who know me and know of my service in the community know that I'm an advocate. And when I listen to people, the things I hear on their minds is jobs. The American dream has become an American nightmare. Special interests of the greed machine have been working behind the scenes, forcing American workers to downsize, outsource, and be regulated to temporary jobs. Capitalism is a good thing. It allows money to flow through the economy. But what's going on today is corporate greed, sucking money away from the middle class and from small business owners and away from local cities to the point that they can't even hire enough police officers or firefighters. We need fair trade, not freewheeling trade that put American workers at a disadvantage. I will work to create a level playing field in trade and hold China accountable for its currency manipulation. We need to stop rewarding corporations with subsidies that when they return the favor by eliminating American jobs. Unlike my opponent, I will protect the president's health care plan because it protects American workers and veterans. The physical and mental wellness of our soldiers and veterans is urgent. Progress is being made, and I will stand firm to protect these gains against the special interests and the greed machine. As we continue to recover, I will protect unemployment benefits so that those who are still looking for work will be able to search for a job and continue turning while the economy is turning around. When I am elected, you will have an advocate in Congress focused on recovery, fighting the greed machine, and protecting the middle class and restoring the American dream.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhue, the first question this evening is for you. How would you change the culture in Washington, and specifically, are you willing to oppose your party's leadership, and how and under what circumstances would you be willing to work across the aisle?
How will I change the culture in Washington? Number one, the culture in Washington has got to understand that they're working in silos. Silos are what's dividing people. Silos that have people thinking that I'm conservative over here, I'm liberal over here, I got this issue because I'm Caucasian, I got this issue because I'm black. So we've got to get people out of their comfort zone and put them in a situation to where they understand that they have similar issues and similar concerns. Now, you had a four-part question.
How and when would you work across the aisle?
I would work across the aisle on all the major issues that I could. I have worked across the aisle before as a county commissioner, putting situations together like the jail, mental health unit in the Kent County Jail, putting situations together like the community advisory forum that's in Fifth Third Bank. So I will continue to work across the aisle on financial issues as well as issues that are dear and near to the community.
Thank you. Mr. Miles, this one's for you. How do you think the political parties can work together to address the challenges that face our state and our country?
Well, they absolutely need to work together because you absolutely have to have the best policies to solve the tremendous challenges that our nation faces and that our state faces. And we really need to take the best ideas from both parties to get to that place. And that's where I feel that my background as a business lawyer, which is trying to find win-win solutions, will really come in handy, because we need to find the common ground once again. This extreme partisanship, this lockstep party approach, it doesn't work, it doesn't solve problems, it's doing the politicians' business, it's not doing the people's business. I think this year we're going to see the people, the voters, really demanding that from their elected officials. And I think that's why you're going to see some sweeping changes this year in terms of really the voters are fed up. And that's what I'm hearing as I talk to voters throughout the district. They want these problems solved. They want the parties to start to work together. They could care less about labels, whether someone's a conservative or whatever label, could care less about party. They want the problem solved.
Mr. Mayhue, do you support the Arizona immigration legislation, which is now set to take effect there? And do you believe that the federal government is or is not doing its job relative to immigration and border security?
The legislation is decent, but the problem with the legislation is you got reasonable suspicion, versus probable cause. Our Constitution talks in terms of dealing with probable cause to stop a person. Now, reasonable suspicion is anybody that blinks their eye. So in Arizona trying to address the issue, I think Arizona in assertively trying to address the issue because they feel that the federal government has been dilatory, then I think that's fine. But the argument becomes whether I stop you for reasonable suspicion or probable cause. And that's where I think the hat's going to rest when this thing finally goes to court, based on how do I deal with reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. Reasonable suspicion is not part of the Constitution.
Mr. Miles, same question.
Well, immigration is a federal issue, and our policy hasn't been very good over the last generation. Frankly, the Arizona approach, and I agree that it really is probably not going to pass constitutional muster, but we really have to look at, this is a very complex issue. We've got to take the emotion and the rhetoric out of it. It cuts many different ways, and what I believe is that we're a nation of laws as well as a nation of immigrants, and we need to enforce the laws that we have, and we need to make sure that if people are here illegally, that if they want to come forward, if they pass a background check where they don't have a criminal history, if they are willing to pay a fine or back taxes, and if they're willing to learn English, that they can go and get in line, the back of the line, towards citizenship behind people who are here legally. That's what I believe would be the best solution, because we are a nation of immigrants, but we also are a nation of laws, and we should not reward anyone who's broken the law.
It sounds as though you're describing the Bush plan, which was on the table a couple of years ago and didn't move. What would you be able to do as a member of Congress to have that issue front and center again?
Well, actually the Bush plan was shot down by members of his own party. And I think that was something that, again, there's an extreme view out there, and we really have to start looking at these issues from a practical standpoint and not just from an ideological standpoint. There's so much ideological rhetoric going on, especially around this issue. There are jobs in America that immigrants are playing a very key role in. There are certainly jobs in innovation where they're playing a key role, but we also don't want to break up families that are here. And if they are willing to come forward and abide by our laws, then there's a place for them here in the United States.
Mr. Mayhue, how are your economic policies and your economic philosophy different from or similar to those of President Obama?
Well, I was just going to say that, President Obama has just came up with an excellent plan to deal with the immigration, and he talked in terms about American jobs being taken by some people that come in. So I would follow the president's economic plan. I do appreciate the economic legislation that has just passed, because the banks and the brokerage firms and the big greedy corporations and stuff like that have really taken us to task. And so I think that, my plans is very similar, because the president said that when he came into office, I will give you change that you can see. And those financial laws had not been dealt with since 1934. So now we got something to go on. I mean, it's a sweeping change. It might not be everything everybody wants, but baby, it's a change.
Mr. Miles, same question. How does your economic policy dovetail with or separate from President Obama?
Well, I think that one of the things that has concerned me is that there has been in Washington, and this is from both parties, really Wall Street has had way too much influence in Washington. And I think from an economic standpoint, we need to make sure that we continue the policies which are getting us out of this tremendous economic hole that we were in. We lost 8 million jobs, over $1.7 trillion of worth of earnings and savings were lost, Americans. And so we are starting back on the path to recovery, and I think I would continue those. So in that regard, yes. And I think he's put forward jobs bills. He's also put forward some very good economic plans, and the financial reform was much needed. The 1999 repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act really started us on this path to where the financial crisis could occur, because it really allowed too many of the banks and financial institutions to engage in riskier investments without the proper regulatory oversight.
Mr. Miles, this next question is also for you. In the midst of the 2008 financial meltdown, Congressman Ehlers voted in favor of the TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Had you been a member of Congress, would you have cast the same vote?
Well, in the middle of a crisis, President Bush and Treasury Secretary Paulson really, and the Congress were faced with a very difficult choice because they were looking at a complete financial collapse of the economy in terms of credit markets being frozen. And so the problem was the lax oversight, the lax regulations, the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act in 1999 that put us in that position. And so it really was not a great solution. There should have been actually more to protect the taxpayers, both during and after the implementation of the TARP in terms of, I'm glad some of the money is being paid back now, but we are all outraged by the bonuses that some of these banks are paying. But at the end of the day, it was a bipartisan effort. It was started by President Bush and Treasury Secretary Paulson, and it needed to be done at the time to save the economy because small businesses and working families were paying the price for the reckless behavior of those large financial institutions on Wall Street. And so we have to protect Main Street.
Mr. Mayhue, same question. If you'd been in office, would you have voted for TARP as Congressman Ehlers did?
Well, looking back 2020, you know, I can't really judge that, but more than likely I would have, you know, because I would have saw the seriousness of the situation. But I think the difference is I would have fought for some rules to it, you know, because what the President Obama came in and added rules to the TARP. And I would have fought for rules. I mean, when they passed the TARP, it was just money. You know, here's a giveaway to big corps. And that's not the way to go. It's bad enough that Main Street didn't get the blessing that it should have got. But still, you know, you gotta be able, you can't be a big government, a big intellectual government, and not understand you need rules with money, because we know that unfettered greed and people with their hands and everything is there. And also I like the mental health parity bill that passed along with it.
Mr. Mayhue, the next question begins with you. Our nation is at war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. Would you explain, please, how your views on those two war fronts either concur with or are different from those of the administration?
I think mine's more concur with the administration because I would really want us to stop the wars. Because what's happening right now is that we're over there fighting wars for special interests, and our children and our future is being ate up by the war. So we've got to continue along with the president and try to phase ourselves out of these wars. It's not that we have to be protectionists, you know, God forbid, but we need to be able to phase ourselves out of this war so that we can have educational products coming to our children. Because we've got to educate our communities. We've got to have financial growth from within our community. Whatever happened to domestic content and stuff like that bring Americans together? So we've got to be able to bring Americans together. And that's not happening. So I would be firmly with the president. I might even say, let's do it a little faster, President.
Mr. Miles, same question.
Well, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, one thing the president did, which was very responsible, is he put them in the federal budget, which is something the prior administration did not do. It was always a supplemental expenditure, so to at least account for it. Second, these were unfunded wars. And so that was also fiscally irresponsible by the prior administration. But in terms of this president's approach, you know, as far as Afghanistan, that war was originally to again go after the Taliban, who were giving safe harbor to Osama bin Laden, who had orchestrated the attacks on 9/11. And so I definitely support this president's pursuit of Osama bin Laden. The war in Iraq was a distraction from those who attacked us. But I felt that the president could also have looked at a third option in terms of Afghanistan. He was only presented with two, either withdrawal or surge. And I think there could have been more of an internationalization of the effort, going more towards special operations and using covert activities with other countries rather than using our troops on the ground.
After Iraq and Afghanistan, Mr. Miles, what are the next most important issues on the international stage?
Well, I think one is China, and in particular the trade policy with China. China is devaluing its currency, the renminbi, because that is making its products cheaper here in the United States and making our products more expensive there. So that is causing a trade imbalance which is approaching several hundred billion dollars, and so that is a major problem with China. In terms of military aspects, I think again North Korea is always something that's something of concern in terms of their leadership there. Pakistan is a very dangerous situation, given its neighboring to Afghanistan. The Middle East is a hot spot. I mean, this president has a lot on his plate in terms of international affairs as well as the domestic affairs. He's really inherited a lot of problems.
Mr. Mayhue, same question. After Iraq and Afghanistan, what's the most important international issue?
I think the most important international issue is terrorism. So because like Secretary Gates has said, it's time to retool the Army. We're not in World War I or World War II again at this point. But we've got to retool the Army and retool the Army to fit the now age, because terrorism and war is different than wars of the past. And so we've got to get a handle on terrorists. Even if we come out of Iraq and Afghanistan, there is still terrorism that haunts us. The shoe bomber, all those things that happen, where, you don't even expect it. So people wearing belts and stuff like that and blowing themselves up. We've got to get a handle on that. We don't want that on our soil. We've had New York. We don't want no more of that. So we've got to get the handle on the terrorists. And I don't know how we're going to do that, but that's where we've got to go. And maybe that's through some other type of covert actions. I don't know.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhue, next question begins with you. We've all watched the BP disaster in the Gulf. What is your opinion on what happened? And please inform us on your views of what you think the nation's energy future ought to include.
I think what happened is that we had a greedy group of business people down there digging, for oil that didn't set up the proper tools to look out for the type of spill that happened. It's been reported in the press that that's what happened. In terms of future, we've got to divorce ourselves from oil. We've got to be able to divorce ourselves from oil, create an infrastructure, grid in terms of dealing with, in Michigan, the electronic grids. We've got to be able to deal with a new energy. Ford today announced that it would sell an electronic car, at the same price as a regular car. So we've got new energy. We just got a battery factory here in the States, in Michigan. So we've got a new thing to try to work on. We've got to work that new energy. We've got to work the clean energy. And we've got to do things like that. Now, the oil spill, that was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. I'm saying that because I'm out of time. I can't go any further.
Mr. Miles, the same question.
Sure. Well, a couple things. Lack of regulatory oversight. BP was a repeat offender. We're seeing that now compared to other oil companies, but BP had several hundred times the rate of infractions that other oil companies had. That was a major problem. Lacks oversight. Government has a proper role to protect consumers, to protect the environment when there isn't time for a market-based response. That's when government really needs to be a proper regulatory role to prevent devastating permanent harm to the American people and to the environment. And we saw a philosophy that does not like any type of government regulation, and that is a problem. And so that the agency that was charged with enforcing the rules against BP was lax. And so we also obviously have to reduce our dependence on dangerous oil and get to a clean energy economy. And that's a great opportunity for Michigan in terms of creating the next generation of jobs. And I want to see those jobs here in Michigan. I hope we get a chance to talk about those a little more when I have more time. But we absolutely have to reduce our dependence on foreign oil.
Well, the next question is for you. What do you believe would be appropriate components of an alternative energy future? And specifically, would you agree to site windmills in Lake Michigan?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things is again, Michigan was an agricultural leader in the 1800s. We've been an industrial leader in the 1900s. And in this century, we need to be the clean energy leader. We have a lot of excess manufacturing capacity here. I believe that when you invest in converting those manufacturing plants to clean energy jobs, you can get a 6-to-1 return on your dollar investment. For every dollar the government spends, there can be a $6 return on what the private industry can get. The big windmills that are being manufactured, those are being manufactured in Europe. They should be manufactured here in Michigan with American jobs. The solar panels, they should be manufactured here with Michigan jobs. We need jobs in the clean energy economy. We need research and development tax credits to encourage innovation so that businesses, particularly small businesses, can create those jobs here. Windmill energy is a tremendous opportunity and again will help us get to a clean energy economy.
And would you agree to have them sited in the lake?
Well, I think, yes, I think I would be amenable to that. In fact, some of these, I've heard that in other areas where there's wind farms, they can actually become tourist attractions. People like to go and see the windmill farms because that can actually boost tourism. But also, if they can be placed far enough out on the horizon where they can't be seen, that's fine too, as long as there's a technology to make sure the electricity gets here efficiently for the people and for the companies that are going to need the electricity. But I would not be opposed necessarily to wind farms in the lake. We've got a tremendous source of wind energy there that we should take advantage of.
Mr. Mayhue, same question. What should be part of our alternative energy future, and would you also speak to wind energy?
Well, our alternative energy future, we should redo the whole electrical recovery act. That whole electrical recovery act just got really blown. It's a bad type of a situation. So we've got, in Michigan, we've got to create an electrical grid, so that when we transition into the electrical energy, then we have electrical grids that's powerful enough to give people the proper energy going forward from city to city. Now, I would not, definitely, I would not agree to putting the wind turbines in the water just right up front, because our Great Lakes it's some powerful things and they're good, and so we have to be able to see, on a test basis, what will that do to the water ecology and to the fish and everything else that's in there.
Thank you. And speaking of fish,
let's go fish.
Asian carp.
Oh, Mr. Miles, if you were a member of Congress, what would you be encouraging your colleagues to do about the threat of the Asian carp swimming its way toward the Great Lakes?
Absolutely. Well, I think our congressional delegation here in Michigan is on the right track. Both Representative Ehlers, Representative Hoekstra, Senator Stabenow, who's introduced legislation on this issue. We have to protect the Great Lakes. That's a $7 billion industry, the fishery industry, the recreational industry for us here in Michigan. We've got to protect the Great Lakes. Again, the canals which are connecting the Lake Michigan to the rivers where the Asian carp are coming through, those are man-made canals. They can be shut off through it's a man-made problem that can be solved with the solutions. If the measures, which are talking about electrical walls and other things, if they don't work, we're going to have to shut off those locks. There is a solution for the state of Illinois. They can do over-the-ground transport instead of using the barges. The additional cost is $10 per ton. So that's a solution for them so that their economy isn't overly harmed. But the Asian carp eats 40% of its body weight every day. It's an incredibly invasive species. It could completely change the ecology here in our Great Lakes. They jump out of the water, which destroys fishing. So we've got to protect the Great Lakes from this invasive species, which is not a natural fish for this area.
Mr. Mayhue, the fish.
The fish. The Asian carp was brought to America by the catfish farmers. And I see the Asian carp situation as very similar to the oil spill. We made BP help to clean up the oil spill. Now, nobody's saying anything about the catfish farmers, that brought the Asian carp into the country. So somebody needs to participate. You can't just have government one way. I don't like government when it's convenient for me, but I like government when it's going to take care of my problem. So you can't have government just one way. And I think that, that within itself should dictate, how we deal with it. No, we don't need the Asian carp jumping up and down and destroying our fish, but then people that have a responsibility that bring them here, they need to have a responsibility to help clean it up.
Next question, begin with Mr. Mayhue. Some economists have suggested recently that the discretionary budget in Washington is going to be fully consumed by Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. If you're a member of Congress, what would you do about the entitlement matters and the fact that it could essentially eliminate your ability to spend any discretionary funds?
What I would do, if I was there, I'd cut subsidies to big corporations that's shipping our jobs out of the country. Right now, everybody's on welfare. You take a Tea Party person that'll tell you that I'm not on welfare, but they're on Social Security, and they're still getting government benefits. You take the big corporations out there, most of them are getting subsidies from the government. If we're going to start cutting subsidies, we need to cut it at the highest level in this land. Cut them subsidies for the banks. Cut the subsidies for the brokerage firms and all these other people that's creating derivatives that we don't even understand what they are. We need to start cutting subsidies where it is, because corporate welfare is alive and well. Period.
Mr. Miles, same question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat
On
the question?
entitlements. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the discretionary budget.
Right. Well, the discretionary spending is about $520 billion, and we have a $1.27 trillion deficit. So you can't, even if you took all of the discretionary spending out of the budget, you can't balance the budget. Social Security right now is in surplus, and it will be until 2017. So, in terms of, are you saying the question is in terms of cutting discretionary spending to balance the budget? Was that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, again, you can't get there with just discretionary spending, or even if you wanted to start cutting Social Security. I absolutely will fight to protect Social Security for our seniors. I will fight any effort to try and privatize Social Security. The people who are relying on that's our social safety net. So I will protect Social Security going forward to make sure it's solvent after 2017 through 2041, which is when it starts to become borrowing against the trust fund. We really do have to start making some modifications going forward. But for now, for those who are receiving Social Security, that's a sacred trust, and we should not touch that. And we certainly shouldn't privatize it, especially after we look at the stock market drop we had of 50% 2 years ago.
And here's the follow-on question. What is the most courageous political decision you feel could be made to address the national deficit? And start with Mr. Miles.
Well, one of the decisions that I don't know how courageous it is, but I'm proposing that we should the Congress members should have a 5% pay cut every year the budget isn't balanced, because I think politicians need to put their money where their mouths are, and there's a lot of talk in Washington from both parties about being fiscally responsible, and they need to do what working families and businesses do. When you don't hit your budget, you take a hit, and so they should take we should take a 5% congressional pay cut every year the budget isn't balanced. The second thing, and I don't know how courageous this is, but we need a presidential line item veto that will cut the waste and pork out of bloated congressional budgets. And finally, we need to adhere to the pay-as-you-go principles that were adopted in 2007, in January of 2007, so that any new programs, any new spending is fully funded.
Mr. Mayhue, what are you going to do as a member of Congress to help Michigan retain the jobs it has and generate new jobs in the future? In other words, what's the role of Congress in job creation here in Michigan?
The role of Congress in job creation here in Michigan is to facilitate the funding from the national government to come into the economy. And then, so in that facilitation, I would facilitate a situation so that the banks would stop using their tight money policies and let their monies flow so that small business can start to doing what small business do, create jobs. Right now, the entrepreneur can't even be an entrepreneur in Michigan because everything is so tight, so we got to stimulate the economy by making banks begin to lend the money they have not begun to lend the money. So small business is sitting out there on a limb right now because of banks and their tight money policy. Also, one other thing is that now big business corporations have over $1 trillion sitting on the side right now. They need to spend that money because, you know, it takes money to be spent in order to make money. So everybody's sitting back tight, watching everybody scuffle. And somebody's got to loosen that up. And I would boldly do that.
Mr. Miles, same question. What's the role of Congress for job creation in Michigan?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things is middle class needs a tax cut because when consumers in the middle class get a tax cut, they have more money to spend. That money goes right in the economy. People don't hoard that money. They don't invest in exotic financial instruments overseas. They spend it on food, clothing, and appliances. That'll help stimulate the economy. Second, small business does create most of the jobs in the United States. I've been a small business lawyer for the past 19 years. Small businesses have created over the last 15 years 64% of net new job growth, and that's also where the innovation is. We need to lower taxes on small business. For example, we need to accelerate their depreciation so when they buy assets and equipment, they can get a better and faster return on that, because not only is it helping the business that is buying that asset, that equipment, but it's also helping the business that makes it. They also need to have research and development tax credits to encourage innovation, to converting to a clean energy economy. And also, they do need more access to capital from the banks. We need to make sure that the banks start lending again to the small businesses, because that is one of the #1 challenges that small businesses face, is access to capital to grow in the future and also to give stability in tough times.
Mr. Miles, for you, on the campaign trail in 2008, President Obama said he would amend NAFTA. If a bill came to Congress and you were serving, what would you expect to see in that bill and for you to be able to support it?
Well, absolutely. I think NAFTA has had a very dramatic negative effect on Michigan in particular in terms of manufacturing jobs. And our products, our workers, our companies can compete with any in the world when there's a level playing field. And when companies in other countries are subject to lower environmental standards, lower worker safety standards, and lower wages, that's obviously not fair to our workers here. So I would definitely support fair and reciprocal trade. That's what we need in our trade agreements, fair and reciprocal trade, so we're competing on a level playing field. Second, we need to see more enforcement of those treaties. That is one of the main problems with NAFTA, is the lack of enforcement. There are some provisions in there that are actually very good, but they've actually not been enforced properly by the United States, and we need to make sure that we're enforcing the provisions that have been agreed to. So I will insist on fair and reciprocal trade when I'm in Congress, because we've got to protect American jobs. We also have to stop tax breaks to companies that are shipping American jobs overseas. That's wrong. That needs to stop right away.
Mr. Mayhue, same question. NAFTA.
NAFTA continues to give us the shafter. So
I need a rhyme for reciprocal. I'm telling you.
So
I'm working on that.
We talk about free trade. You know, we're talking about fair trade, not free trade. You know, I mean, it's got to be fair. You know, I mean, for people to like China to make their dollars, their currency more, and make us pay more for our goods, for their goods, and it's just ridiculous. You know, so we need to have fair trade. You know, not free trade. Free trade is what's got us in this quagmire that we're in. So we've got to have some real fair trade, and and enforce the rules that were set forth by NAFTA. I mean, if there's rules that make the playing field level for business, then they need to be enforced. You know, I can't see how we set up rules and play around with not enforcing them. I understand that there's politics, back and forth, but then there's the bureaucrats up there that's got to do their job.
Thank you. Mr. Miles, next question is for you. The Bush-era tax cuts are set to expire in the next year. If you are serving in Congress, what would your policy be on either allowing them to expire or extending them?
Sure. Well, going back again, we were in a time of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and for the first time in American history, we had a tax cut, a $1.6 trillion tax cut. Instead of calling on the American people to sacrifice, as we are all willing to do when there's a common cause, we are a selfless people. We will sacrifice. The President Bush did not call on us to sacrifice. Instead, he wanted to just give us more goodies and put that on the backs of our children and grandchildren to pay for. We'll pay for it later attitude. And now we are still in a financial crisis that we're coming out of, and we're looking at, again, a $1.27 trillion deficit. The Bush tax cuts need to expire, except for those making less than $250,000, the middle class, who continue to need tax relief. But in terms of those who are making people who are making over $1 million over the next decade, they will get $686 billion from those tax cuts if they continue. I think that we all have to pay our fair share. The sacrifice needs to be across the board, but we can't afford to continue the policies that the Bush administration implemented that have left us in this hole.
Mr. Mayhue, same question.
Well, I would let them expire because the richest 2% of this country, they don't really need those tax breaks. You know, we got people that's going to be becoming age of retirement and won't even know what a defined benefit plan is, and that's going to be horrible. You're going to have we at a situation now where we're going to have more people that's going to be on Social Security, SSI, and disability, you know, because we're giving the richest people in the country, you know, everything. You know, the derivatives, the greed machine, all that stuff has been fed up to the top 2% of the country. And that's not how our country is. We've lost the middle class, and it's almost a boogeyman to say, you know, that we can have the American dream. That's horrible. We've got to restore hope in this community for people. People are losing hope, and when we don't have hope in this community for people, we get chaos.
Mr. Mayhue, the next question is for you. There had been some speculation this year that cap and trade would come up in Congress as a first step in dealing with greenhouse gases. It did not. Would this be a legislative priority of yours?
Well, yes. You know, because I think we've got to deal with the greenhouse gases. I think that, you know, what's happening in terms of greenhouse gases, it's destroying our ecosystem. And whether you believe former ex-Vice President Gore or not, you know, we've got to get a grip on that whole situation of the whole greenhouse, hothouse type of a situation that is really destructive to the ecosystem. You know, so yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Miles.
Sure. Well, I think that and from our energy policy, which was mostly written by the energy industries over the past decade, we need to look carefully, and I think there is the right balance between protecting our environment and protecting American jobs. And again, I talked about converting to a clean energy economy, having reasonable mandates in terms of lowering carbon emissions. Actually, cap and trade worked very well for the acid rain in 1990. It was actually one of the most successful programs we've had in terms of health benefits. There was a 40-to-1 return on every dollar that was spent on that acid rain using a cap and trade to lessen the effects of acid rain. But I think we need to look very carefully at going forward to make sure our policy is reasonable so that we can convert to a clean energy economy, and at the same time protect our environment, which we must do. So I think there is a balance there, protecting American jobs through the clean energy economy, and also making sure that American jobs are created out of that and out of that innovation.
Next question is for you, Mr. Miles. Had you been in Congress at the time it came up, would you have voted for the No Child Left Behind Education Act? And what is the appropriate role for the federal government in K-12 education?
Right. Well, I'm a big believer in education. My mother was a public schools elementary teacher here in the Grand Rapids Public Schools for 30 years. I am a product of that system. I've served on the Aquinas College Board of Trustees for the past 17 years, including a term as chair. So I'm a big believer in anything that the federal government mandates for performance excellence should be fully funded. And so that's the number one thing. The No Child Left Behind was not fully funded, needed to be. I'm a big believer in early childhood development because we get a great return on that investment. I'm a big believer in reduced class sizes because that improves student performance. We need to make college more affordable. There's a federal role for that with Pell Grants and also lowering the interest rates that students are paying on their student loans, and also lifelong learning and training for workers to continue to upgrade their skills. We get such a great return on our education investments, and we really haven't been doing enough in that area. So I definitely consider that a priority of mine. But in terms of any of those federal mandates for performance and excellence, we've got to make sure that they're fully funded. That's the proper role. If the federal government's going to set a standard for excellence, we need to make sure that it's funded, that we don't punish teachers. We're not teaching to the test.
Mr. Mayhue, same question. No Child Left Behind, the role of the federal government in K-12 education.
I think it was bad legislation, and the way I read it, I would have voted against it. But I think the federal government's role in education is to prevent us as a nation from going back pre-Brown versus the Board of Education. That it is the role of government because, you know, with the situation in the country now, we could easily slide back into that. And we don't need to go back there. You know, we should be able to move forward, come out of our silos and keep moving forward. Early childhood education should be a mainstay in education because when we talk about the child, you know, the 0 to 5 years of age, that's the most crucial learning period for a child. Today I was just at the Pine Rest listening to an autism type of a situation where they were talking about autism. And this lady, they showed us a picture of a child that was 3 years old with autism. So it's crucial, you know, that we get a grip, and early childhood intervention should be a mainstay as part of education, and we don't need to go back to pre-Brown versus Board of Education.
Thank you. Mr. Miles, the next one is for you. If you are the Democratic nominee for Congress, will you invite President Obama to campaign here in West Michigan for you?
I'll invite him. I don't know if he's going to come or not. There's a lot of other races that I think he's very interested in, but I think anytime you have the President of the United States coming to West Michigan to see the people here, to learn about our challenges, to see our resiliency, how we weather tough times, how we overcome tough times, and we still find the way to invest in our future, I think that's a good thing. When he was here in Kalamazoo speaking to the Kalamazoo Central High School, that was a wonderful thing. When he was out in Holland at the new battery plant, a great thing again. I think when you have the president and all the attention that the president brings to our area, nothing but good things can come of that, no matter who the president is. It's a tremendous thing and a tremendous honor, and we are more than happy to show off all of our successes here in West Michigan, and also to share our challenges with him so that he doesn't ignore what's going on in West Michigan.
Mr. Mayhue, same question.
Sure, I'd have the president here. I like him. I went to the Tea Party event here in Kent County and stood up for it. You know, they were down there, and I waited 2 hours to get 2 minutes to stand up to support our president in the face of the Tea Party. And they were nice to me. They treated me with respect. And I stood up and said that the president is doing an excellent job. I didn't get one boo. I did not get one boo. And I said that the president has a tremendous thing upon him. I think he's doing an excellent job in dealing with China, and they still were receptive to me at the Tea Party. So I think that we need the president here. And, you know, the president is an excellent person, gifted man, and he stays calm. I like him for that.
Mr. Mayhue, mostly on the other side of the aisle, candidates for Congress and the U.S. Senate are suggesting that the recently passed Health Care Reform Act should be repealed and replaced. If you're a member of Congress and such a bill comes to the floor, how will you handle that?
I wouldn't repeal and replace it. You know, I think that what has happened is metamorphic. The president has done an excellent job. He had a short stick. and he took that short stick and whipped it into a long stick. So now we all have health care that we can be proud of. And I'm proud to have my young child that can stay on my insurance, till they get to age 26. Right now, we got the Heart of the City Health Center right there at Sheldon and Cherry, which is a part of that community health center. We're going to save this state mega bucks by keeping people from going to the ER. We'll be able to deal with 28,000 people at the Heart of the City Health Center. So that'll take the pressure off the ER room, plus it'll take pressure off Medicaid so that the taxes on Medicaid and all that stuff won't continue to go up. So I am very proud of that.
Mr. Miles, the voters in the Democratic primary here on August 3rd can't have both of you. They're going to have to choose one or the other. What did you hear tonight from Mr. Mayhue that draws a distinction that is different from a view that you hold that will help those voters decide which one of you to select?
Well, I think in terms of a distinction is we have to acknowledge that that the Democratic Party isn't always right and the Republican Party isn't always wrong, that there are good ideas in both parties and that we need to take the best ideas from both to get things done. I certainly admire and respect Mr. Mayhue's service to this community over the years, and we share many, many values. But I think that we really have to look at my experience as a business lawyer. Small businesses are the job creators. That's really going to be my priority in terms of creating new jobs. I understand what it takes for small businesses to create jobs, and so that's the area I've been working in for the past 19 years. And so that will be my number one priority is jobs through the small business investments and encouraging innovation by small businesses, and also being focused on education priorities as well as environmental and the budget. Really, we need to focus on getting the budget under control. So that's something that I really intend to work hard on.
Mr. Mayhue, help the voters out. Where do you differ from Mr. Miles?
Well, I believe in speak softly but carry a big stick. And what I differ from Mr. Miles is he thinks that you can go to Washington and make a love fest with the Republicans instantly and bring the bacon back home. Power politics. You got to be able to speak softly but carry a big stick. And also sometimes give some honey every now and then to a person so that you can try to rope them in. But there's no way you got those ideologues down there that you're going to be able to do a love fest and say, come on, let's sit down. Power only yields to power. That's in America. America is Machiavellian. And so they say, let me hold you in your hand and then I'll crush you. So we've got to have a philosophical change in our political thinking. Because we can't continue to be Machiavellian and trying to crush neighborhoods, trying to crush neighborhoods, people trying to crush people. But we've got to use the tools that we have. And if we have a majority, we've got to work it. 60 votes passed the bill today the other day on the finance thing. We've got to use it.
30 seconds.
Right. Well, being a business lawyer, I'm not exactly used to love fests. I'm used to pretty tough negotiations. So when you're negotiating with deals, with other lawyers especially. So I'm very pragmatic and very practical thinking. And I think that I just want to use creativity and the best policies and analysis to come up with the best policies. That's what the American people are demanding now. They're going to find unacceptable politicians who don't take that approach. I think those politicians, they're going to have a very short lifespan, regardless of their party. We've got to solve the American people's problems. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I've been prepared to do over the past 19 years in both my professional life. And so
Hold that thought,
Sure.
because we've reached the point of the program now where we're nearly out of time, and it is the opportunity for final statements.
Okay.
By previous agreement, Mr. Miles will go first. Mr. Miles.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much again for this opportunity to talk to the people of the 3rd District. As I've gone throughout this district, whether it's been from the city of Rockford or Spencer Township down into Berry County and into Ionia County and in the city of Grand Rapids. I've walked, knocked on doors, talked to people. They are responding to my message. The American people, the people in the 3rd District, are tired of the extreme partisanship. They're tired of the lockstep approach. They want the problem solved. They know we're facing major problems. I'm offering very specific solutions on the 3 major issues of the day: jobs, the economy, education, and the budget, which you've heard here tonight. That's what we need in Washington. We need someone who's going to focus on those 3 issues with solutions, who's going to be a problem solver, not a problem creator. All of the partisan bickering, all of the partisan gamesmanship, the drawing lines in the sand, going in with a heavy hand, it's not going to work. We need to start working together to get results. That's the West Michigan way. Those are the values that I was brought up with. Those are the values that I intend to take to Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the last word of the day, Mr. Mayhue.
Well, I just hope Mr. Miles' position as a merger and acquisition lawyer don't get in the way of anything. But, you know, what I would do, you know, I just thank everybody for being here. I just thank everybody for listening. I am out there knocking on doors and talking to people. You know, today I went down to the Guiding Light Mission and talked to some homeless people and had a wonderful conversation, you know, about NAFTA, you know, about jobs. People down there homeless is saying, you know, we've got to fix NAFTA. So if the words on the street is like that, is that we got to fix NAFTA. You know, so that's from the homeless shelter all the way up to here. We've got to fix NAFTA. We've got to bring jobs back, whichever way we can. And if it takes, you know, brute politics of 60 votes, then that's what we got to do to bring it back. But I would love to be able to work across the aisle with my Republican friends, because I've done that as a county commissioner. And I will always espouse to do that. Thank you.
Patrick Miles and Paul Mayhue, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And now, on behalf of the Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies at Grand Valley State University, I'm Matt McLogan. Thank you for joining us, and good night.